I'm Andreas Hamberger, and this is the Hamberger Report, where I cover AI governance, enterprise architecture, and the technology decisions that actually matter to the people who have to make them. If you find this useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. Now let's get into it. On Friday, the 30th of January 2026, SpaceX filed an FCC application requesting authorization for 1 million satellites. Not connectivity infrastructure, not internet service, orbital data centers, AI compute infrastructure, positioned between 500 and 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, beyond the reach of any single terrestrial regulator. The current Starlink constellation is roughly 10,000 satellites. This filing represents a 100-fold expansion, a categorical shift. Lange by Andreas Hamberger. This is the Hamberger Report, where I cover AI governance and what it means for the professionals who have to make it work. The week before the filing was published, I was running a strategy session with a CIO at a mid-sized health provider. We were working through their AI governance framework when I mentioned the SpaceX application. She went quiet. Then saw all our jurisdictional assumptions, they just expire. I did not have a ready answer. That is why I am making this episode. Elon Musk framed the proposal in civilizational terms, describing it as a step toward becoming a Kardashev Type 2 civilization, one capable of harnessing the full energy output of the sun. I call this the Kardashev pivot. The moment when commercial actors begin treating Earth's regulatory frameworks as constraints to transcend rather than rules to operate within. Whether the million satellite number survives regulatory negotiation is almost beside the point. The FCC typically approves satellites in tranches of around 7,500. Even at a tenth of the filing's ambition, the underlying shift in where compute happens and which governance frameworks apply is significant. To understand what orbital compute means for governance practitioners, it helps to remember what happened in the 1960s in international waters off the coast of England. Radio Caroline anchored beyond the 12-mile limit, broadcasting pop music outside the reach of the BBC's licensing regime and the UK's broadcasting laws. The technology operated where the rules did not reach. The government eventually responded, but only after years in which the regulatory gap shaped an entire media landscape. The parallel to orbital AI infrastructure is not about electrical power. Orbital AI compute is not primarily interesting because satellites have free solar energy and passive radiative cooling, though both are genuine advantages. It is interesting because data uplinked directly to orbital infrastructure can be processed by clusters with no fixed jurisdiction, then downlinked to the customer's chosen location. StarCloud CEO stated in a 2025 interview that their payloads do not touch local infrastructure and characterized regulatory access requests as requiring physical orbital presence to serve process. This is not speculative. StarCloud 1 is operational now, handling inference jobs for trading firms and genomic startups. In my AI governance work, I use a framework that maps governance architectures along a spectrum. The Heaven Vector describes AI deployment governed by transparent oversight, accountable decision-making, and equitable access. The Skynet Vector is what happens when the structural incentives of ungoverned technology spaces take over. Concentrated ownership, opaque algorithms, and sovereignty that erodes because there is no mechanism to enforce it. Orbital infrastructure amplifies the dynamics at both ends of this spectrum. Under a collaborative scenario, orbital compute becomes a global engine of shared capability, accessible via open APIs, governed through mutual inspection frameworks, similar to the Antarctic Treaty. Under a concentration scenario, jurisdiction follows orbital coordinates rather than data origins. Compliance frameworks designed for terrestrial geography stop functioning as designed, and access stratifies along investment capacity. The analytical observation is straightforward. Without deliberate governance architecture, the structural incentives favor concentration. That is not a commentary on any actor's intentions. It is a characteristic of ungoverned technology spaces generally. The SpaceX filing did not land in isolation. Within weeks, China announced the development of a gigawatt-class space digital intelligence infrastructure, integrating storage and transmission into a unified orbital cloud. NVIDIA has sent GPUs to orbit to test space-based computing viability. This is not one company's ambition. Multiple state and commercial actors are pursuing orbital compute simultaneously. The technical rationale is real. Terrestrial data centers spend roughly 40% of their energy on cooling. Orbital infrastructure eliminates that overhead. Global AI compute demand is growing at an estimated 100 gigawatts per year. Now return to the CIO in Auckland. The Privacy Act 2020 operates on the basis that processing location is identifiable. The Health Information Privacy Code operates on the basis that AI vendor compliance can be audited against known jurisdictional requirements. Government Chief Digital Officer Cloud Guidance operates on the basis that jurisdiction itself is a meaningful and stable concept. Orbital computing introduces a scenario where each of those foundational assumptions requires re-examination, not because those frameworks were poorly designed, but because they were designed for a technological landscape that is changing. This matters in a practical, not merely theoretical sense for New Zealand organizations. Rocket Lab completed its 81st Electron mission from Mahia on the same day the SpaceX filing landed. The orbital economy runs through our backyard. The Orbital Ruhr Institute for Autonomous Intelligence has been shortlisted for aerospace and marine AI applications. The question of where AI compute happens is not an abstract geopolitical issue. It is a governance question for CIOs, architects, and directors managing systems whose compliance assumptions were built on the premise that you can always find out where the data is. The Kessler syndrome risk is also real. 1 million satellites at this density requires tens of thousands of replacements annually. Analysts note that cascading collision events become statistically more probable as orbital density increases, potentially making low Earth orbit unusable for future generations. In my AI governance work, I examine how hidden dependencies in complex systems cascade into systemic failures. Orbital debris is a physical analog, a shared infrastructure failure that affects all participants, regardless of individual prudence. Here is what I recommend for practitioners based on my professional assessment. First, audit your jurisdictional assumptions. Review your AI vendor contracts now. Where do they specify data processing location? What provisions exist if your vendor introduces orbital processing capabilities? Most contracts do not address this because, until recently, it appeared speculative. The SpaceX filing changes that assessment. Second, add an orbital compute scenario to your strategic risk register. Consider what changes first if AI workloads move to orbit: your compliance frameworks, your vendor contracts, or your audit mechanisms. Run a tabletop exercise with your legal and technology teams. This generates useful clarity regardless of the timeline for orbital compute becoming commercially widespread. Third, engage your vendors proactively. Ask your cloud and AI providers directly about their roadmap for orbital infrastructure, any partnerships with orbital compute providers, and how they would maintain compliance with applicable privacy requirements if processing moved to orbit. Their responses or their inability to respond are themselves useful information for your planning. For boards, the questions are complementary. What is the organization's exposure to jurisdictional change in AI infrastructure? Have governance frameworks been tested against scenarios where processing location is not fixed or readily identifiable? Who in the organization is tracking these developments? I will close with the question that CIO asked me, the one I could not answer at the time. If your AI workloads move to orbit tomorrow, what would break first, your compliance framework or your vendor contracts? The organizations that begin their scenario planning now, before orbital compute is a commercial reality, will be better positioned than those that wait. The Kardashev pivot is underway. The governance question is whether it happens to you or with you. If you are navigating AI governance in your organization, subscribe to the Hamberger Report for daily insights, new videos every day. That is the Hamberger Report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.